Hey, welcome back to Most Buffalo. This afternoon, we're looking back to when there was a trailblazing Miss America, the return of the Canadiana, and remembering the rumbles at Rich Stadium. Most Buffalo's Dave McKinley has our weekly walk back through time when those stories and more were all news to you.
10 years ago this week when Apple introduced the iPhone 6, attracting lines out the door at the Walden Galleria. With every other lawsuit having been settled out of court, the only case that reached a trial regarding Flight 3407 began. It involved the family into whose home the ill-fated plane had crashed 6 years prior. Numbers from the Census Bureau revealed the poverty rate in Buffalo is 2 times the national average. When they release this year's number later this week, you'll likely see that after a decade, not much has changed. And preservationists made a last-minute pitch to save what was the oldest synagogue building in Buffalo. But all you need to do is visit that site on Jefferson near William today to see they were unsuccessful. Meeting without success as well 10 years prior was this group of picketing preservationists protesting Pano's effort to remove this more than 100-year-old home to expand their operation on Elmwood Avenue. Pano's won out, but the restaurant ended up closing at the start of the 2020 pandemic and has not reopened since. The Treasury Department introduced a new nickel, which gave Thomas Jefferson a facelift, and of more interest to folks in these parts, restored the Buffalo to the back of it after an absence of 68 years. And things weren't good down south, because just a week after Francis struck, an even deadlier Hurricane Ivan made landfall, and incredibly, when it did, forecasters could already see Hurricanes Jean and Carl warming up in the bullpen of what turned out to be one of the worst hurricane seasons in recorded history, especially compared to today. By this week in 2004, the number of hurricanes was more than 3 times higher than what we've had so far this year. And while 2024 has produced only 1 major hurricane so far, there had already been 6 by this week in 2004. 30 years ago this week, Miss Alabama won the title of Miss America. This week's News to You pop quiz: what distinction did Heather Whitestone hold apart from any other Miss America before, or since for that matter, when she took the crown this week in 1994. Remember, this was back when Benderson Development plunked down $4 million at a foreclosure auction to buy the moribund Thruway Mall, which had actually started out as a shopping plaza before it was covered and converted into an indoor mall in the 1970s. Benderson then tore it down and put a plaza back up at the site, the one you are familiar with today, at the corner of Walden and Harlem in Cheektowaga. 40 years ago this week, the recently formed Friends of the Canadiana were successful in their first step of their mission to restore the former Crystal Beach boat when they were able to get it brought back to Buffalo. Unfortunately, the rest of the plan never materialized, and it was cut up for scrap. Patrick Duffy of Dallas fame was a Buffalo visitor in town for the premiere of Vamping, a movie shot here in the Queen City, back in the days of Solidarity and 3-piece suits, and when Bills games at Rich Stadium often resembled Fight Club, during a time, as you're about to see here, when those coppers didn't mess around, back in the days when this was all news to you.
All right, now here is the answer to this week's News to You pop quiz. When Heather Whitestone was crowned Miss America 30 years ago this week, she held the distinction of being the first deaf Miss America. Years later, she had her hearing restored through a cochlear implant. She said she was motivated to do so when her young son was crying out for help and she couldn't hear him.